All right, well, welcome back to What Do You Know with Nick and Devin. I'm Nick.
I'm Devin.
Haha, I got him.
You did.
Fooled ya. Anyway, welcome to the episode.
Great to be here.
It's going to be a good one. In the sense of, well, they're all good.
Last episode? Shit.
I don't want to say it, but we are just continuing that continuity of good episodes.
Perfect.
But what
on
I meant
a hot
streak. On a hot streak. What I meant was, I think it's going to be kind of a topic that is a little different for us. And it's sad, and also there's a lot more than like I think I realized about it after researching, and then there's like a lot of I don't know. It's good. I'm excited.
Should I get a tissue box? Will I be sobbing?
No, not sobbing, but it's kind of like
Should our listeners get tissues? Okay.
It's not like when you did Trail of Tears, and I was like, oh fair. Yeah, way to like punch that in the gut. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, that's
it's
fair.
more so like angry, like call to action sort of sadness. Okay. And so yeah. Anyway, let's just dive into it.
Okay.
I feel like I set it up, and then I was going to go into banter, and then I was like, I just feel like at
What
this
are you
point,
gonna talk about?
right? Exactly.
Right.
I can't really. Okay, I'll ask you this.
Yeah.
What's your favorite U2 song?
My favorite U2 song?
Yeah, I know you have one. Big. If anyone doesn't know Devin,
You know me.
huge U2 fan.
I used to have a fat head of Bono in my childhood bedroom.
Did you really?
No, God, no.
It's like, okay, but like really?
No.
Bono glasses and all.
My dad likes U2.
Okay.
He did. I don't know about now.
He just fell off. He was like, no fun.
I don't like U2
At all. No.
Not
Can you
really.
name a song, a U2 song?
No, I can't. I'm really blanking. I know one song.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm blanking on the title. Do you know what it is?
I mean, there's a lot of songs.
What's like the big one?
I feel like there's a few big ones. Sunday, Blondie, Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's really for people who don't like U2, I think that's the only song that we really know.
Yeah. Fair.
But they played at the Sphere in Vegas. And that thing looks
terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Like I was like, this is cool, and at the same time, horrifying. I don't like that I can see it from the outside.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. There's a YouTube out there, Eddie Burback, who did a whole video and being like, what's the Sphere all about?
Yeah.
He went and saw like the movie that was made, the nature doc that was made just for the Sphere.
Okay.
He saw that, and then he wound up seeing the U2 concert as well. And like he told of his experience, and he was like, up close on the outside of the Sphere, it looks awful. Like it's just giant pixelated images.
Yeah.
You have to be far away for it to look nice. And then on the inside, it's if you're afraid of heights, don't go.
Well, because you're looking up a lot, right?
And like the seats, the stands are very narrow and like very on top of themselves, and like you're very high up as well.
See, my big thing with it, I was like, it does seem very cool from a visual standpoint. I'm like, that's incredible for a nature documentary. Awesome. But for a concert, I'm like, I thought I'm supposed to be like watching the band. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because now I'm just watching the graphics.
You're seeing all the visuals.
Right.
And like he did say, I recommend watching the whole video yourself. Yeah. But like Eddie did say like they only sometimes, like, you know how when you go to concerts and you sit far back, they have like the big screen. So like you can still see the band perform while listening to their live music. They only occasionally did that. So like the people way up in the nosebleeds could see shit, but like there were still all of these like weird graphics going on, but not for every song.
Oh,
yeah.
So it just wasn't continually playing?
There was always something on the screen, but
Okay.
it wasn't always a big to-do graphic.
Interesting. Because now that puts any band that performs in the Sphere, now it puts so much pressure on them to have a visual component to their set.
Right. And that's just crazy. And to be able to make it work with the dimensions of the Sphere.
And then you're never going to use that again.
No.
That's it just, So then you take it out of being a music venue, and then it's a giant movie theater. It's an IMAX. Like, what do you make?
Right.
That?
I mean, it could become a cool planetarium show.
Sure. All right. Well, let's get into it.
Yeah, please.
So
what did you two have to do with your topic?
Well, you two actually, Sunday, Bloody Sunday. What do you know about Bloody Sunday?
Does this have to do with the Irish conflict?
Yep. Really boil that one down.
Well, there's a lot going on.
The Troubles.
The Troubles, yes. The Times, the Troubles. I don't think I know the specific events of Bloody Sunday.
Yes.
But I know a lot of general facts about the Troubles.
Okay. So that'll be fun because we do get into kind of like the history leading up to the event.
Yeah.
Then the event and then the aftermath.
Yeah.
Right? Like kind of like a history of, like a crime, like a storytelling of.
Yeah. Because there's a lot here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway. So I will say before we start, like I'm focusing on Bloody Sunday.
Okay.
Right? But we do kind of gloss over the Troubles. But there's so much more involved.
Yes.
So like as we go through this, just for like everyone watching, listening, XYZ, know that there's so much farther we could go into this.
Yeah.
Like this could be a whole series that we did because of the Troubles. It spanned 30 years. Like there's so much more, but specifically we're going to focus on Bloody Sunday and then have some kind of facts interjected to give some more context surrounding some actions and things.
Fair.
Cool?
Yeah.
Sweet. So Bloody Sunday was January 30th, 1972. And this episode releases January 30th, 2024.
Oh, no shit. Wow.
It's kind of like I planned it. And so, British soldier. Say
that again.
I knew this was going to mess me up, too. I knew it. British soldiers shot 26 unarmed civilians, killing 14 during a protest march in Bogside in Derry, Northern Ireland. Starting off strong.
Yeah.
So it was one of the most significant events of the Troubles, and the Troubles were an ethno-nationalist conflict in Northern Ireland that lasted about 30 years. If you boil it down, it's British versus like Irish independence / Protestants versus Catholics.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of that, but of course, so much more nuance and so much more involved in that.
Yeah.
But they have the Unionists versus the Irish Nationalists / Catholics. Sometimes I'll just call them CNNs because it's Catholics and Nationalists. Right. I just can't say Irish Nationalists and Catholics like over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But the Unionists were those loyal to the Crown, loyal to the Union of Great Britain / the UK. Mm-hmm. And then the Irish Nationalists wanted independence from British rule and govern as a sovereign state. Right. So this was the highest number of people killed in a shooting incident during the conflict, and the worst mass shooting in Northern Irish history.
Okay.
Now, I will say there's other incidents that have a higher casualty count, but it's not all shooting.
Okay.
And it's not all Irish nationals.
Okay.
Or like Irish citizens and things of that nature. Okay. So, little history leading up to the event. So Derry is a county. Derry is in County Londonderry, and Derry's full title is actually Londonderry,
right?
But colloquially known as Derry, which is the second largest county in Northern Ireland and the fifth largest on the entire island. At the time, it contained a large nationalist majority. So Catholics and Irish nationalists living in Northern Ireland know the town as kind of an epitome of Unionist misrule because the town itself was a majority Catholics and Irish nationalists.
Okay.
However, a lot of gerrymandering made sure that all elections resulted in a Unionist outcome. So they still ruled over the town, even though majority of nationalists lived in the town.
Did you just like want my blood pressure to like shoot through the roof?
It's gonna happen a lot.
I know it is. And like it's already hot in this room.
Devin is quite warm.
I just like rip my shirt off halfway through this episode, so it's already warm. We're talking about the British already. That irritates me.
Yep.
And I want a free Ireland. Like we're already doing this for me. So okay, all right.
Well, that's like I said like earlier before we started recording. I was like, my topic is gonna make you angry, and I'm kind of excited about it.
Right,
so I can't
fine.
wait to see.
Yep. Let's just keep going.
Okay, let's keep going. So the corruption also led to a decision to deprive the city of investments such as motorways, housing improvement, education, such as like a university was built in a much smaller Protestant majority town nearby, just to continue to withhold resources from Derry. Like you would put the university in the larger city,
Right.
but they were like or Catholic majority, so we're going to move it to the Protestant majority town,
Right.
Which is kind of ridiculous, right?
Can I make one clarification about myself?
Please.
I don't hate British people. I hate the crown and what they've done
Thank you for the specification.
over history and now.
Yes.
British people are fine. UK people, the entire United Kingdom people are fine. It's just the crown that I
vehemently hate.
Yeah.
Should we actually, a little context here, let me pull it up. So Great Britain, Scotland, England, Wales.
Yes.
Right? United Kingdom, Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland. And then the British Isles is all of those plus the entirety of the island of Ireland.
Right.
I didn't know that at first.
Oh, okay.
Well, like I feel like you know all the titles, but you're like, wait. Okay, so there's Britain, then there's England, then there's UK, then there's, you know what I mean? There's all of these subsets.
I think for me, the UK and Great Britain, I didn't know there was that nuance.
Oh, sure.
I didn't know there were differences in those, but I knew like UK is encompassing all of them.
Yep.
And whatnot.
Now we know.
Now we know. Hey, what do you know about that?
Have you heard? So Derry was, because of this kind of deprivation, Derry was the focus of civil rights campaigns in Northern Ireland, led by organizations such as the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association, or NICRA.
Okay.
And so starting in the late 1960s is kind of when this first started like popping off, right?
And I'm sorry if you said this. Where on the island is Derry? Is it more like central, more north?
It's in Northern Ireland. So all of this takes place in Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So August of 1969, a major riot breaks out in Derry, which is called the Battle of the Bogside, which pushes Northern Ireland to ask the Crown for military support and is often seen as the start of the Troubles.
Okay.
So August of 1969 is when the Troubles kind of begin, right? So the riot lasted 3 days with a clash between Catholics/nationalists and loyalists. CNNs were organized under the Derry Citizens Defense Association. Loyalists supported the Royal Ulster Constabulary, yes.
Okay.
And was the Northern Ireland, and that was the Northern Ireland. So, sorry. Let me try this again.
Yeah, please.
The RUC, or the Royal Ulster Constabulary, was the Northern Ireland police force.
Okay.
So it was kind of the clash of the police force with Irish nationalists / Catholics. Okay. So the RUC drove back CNNs to the Bogside as a Protestant fraternity marched past them and attacked Catholic homes. That was kind of the start of the riot. Residents fought back against the RUC with stones and petrol bombs, aka Molotov cocktails. So they call them petrol bombs. We kind of more colloquially know them as Molotov cocktails. I'm going to call them petrol bombs.
That's fine. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I mean, Molotov comes from a little bit further east from Ireland,
if you will. Correct. So residents immediately built barricades, petrol bomb workshops, and sent out a radio transmission to call for resistance. Like, this only lasted this part of it lasted 3 days, and they were like, activation, go.
Hell yeah.
I was like, oh my God. So the RUC used tear gas, which was the first time the use of tear gas was used in Ireland.
Really?
Yeah.
This was, I'm sorry.
1969.
1969.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Mm-hmm. We are experts already by the time of the U.S.
Yeah, we got it. Don't you worry. We're about to use. We've used even worse gas. So the Irish government called on the UN to send a peacekeeping force. The RUC was withdrawn, and the British Army was deployed. Bogside became a restricted area, like a no-go area.
Yeah.
And was known as, quote, Free Derry.
Okay.
And military police were finally allowed in October of 1969. So like 2 months later.
Yeah.
And then they were like, all right, fine, we'll open up.
Okay.
So that kind of, again, starts the Troubles, right? And we kind of kick off. And again, Bloody Sunday's only about 2 years later, right?
Right.
So at first, Catholics were welcoming to the British Army because they were seen kind of as a neutral force, right? Because a lot of it's kind of Irish specific conflict in a way, right? Because I'm mad at you because you're loyal to a crown. Yes, I'm mad at the British for coming over, but it's more so I'm mad at you for being an Irish person and not, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, but that quickly deteriorated. And so the RUC, of course, was the major enemy, a sectarian kind of bigoted police force. So they were like, you're kind of a dick all of the time.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where that kind of centralized in that conflict.
Yeah, well, when you have like just a militant police force patrolling an area that they shouldn't be in, it kind of,
it leads to some conflict.
I think a powder keg, mayhaps, if I will.
Mayhaps. I think they use some of those in this. So violence continued to rise in Northern Ireland, and in response, the British Army introduced internment without trial in August of 1971. So an operation that involved the mass arrest and internment of people suspected of being involved with the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. They would just immediately be arrested and interned. No trial, no nothing. That was August 1971.
Love that.
Okay?
Perfect.
Sick. So
Sick, bro.
on the day this order was introduced, killings immediately began.
Yeah.
So 11 civilians, it's not funny, I'm so sorry. It's more so like quips and uncomfortability will produce laughter.
Right. We're just laughing through like, oh God, this is terrible.
The pain. Yeah, just throwing that one out there.
Yeah.
I am not a Union loyalist, just saying. So 11 civilians were killed by the Parachute Regiment in Belfast, known as the Ballymurphy Massacre. The next day, the first British soldier was killed by a sniper in the provincial IRA or provisional IRA in Derry. So I will say there's two factions of the IRA, the provisional IRA and the official IRA.
Okay.
I did not look into what the difference is, but I will be saying provisional and official. Okay. Know that they are separate and also on the same side, but separate.
I think one might be like more hardcore.
So after a quick Google search, because it just made more sense in the moment to look that up, the provisional IRA was found mostly in like Belfast and Derry and was really centralized around action. And the official IRA was kind of the broader scope and more focused on strategy, more focused on kind of how we actually liberate ourselves. Whereas the provisional was like
more like boots on the ground in the shit. And the official was like, let's do this a little bit more not like
I know what you mean. Yeah, absolutely.
Not politically, but like let's long term.
The provisional IRA is kind of at the heart of the troubles.
Yeah.
So they're in the action, and I don't think it's mostly. I think it's just a faction of ideology. Of how to fight back, and that's kind of because of that faction, you kind of have these two titles. But again, it's all within the Irish Republican Army.
Yeah. The umbrella of the IRA.
Correct. Yep. So the next day, the first British soldier was killed by a sniper in the provisional IRA in Derry. A month later, Annette McGavigan, a 14-year-old Catholic schoolgirl, was killed by a British soldier. 2 months later, Kathleen Thompson, a 47-year-old mother of 6, was shot dead in her own garden by the British Army in Derry. 30 British soldiers were killed across the remaining months of 1971 by the IRA. Previously, only 10 soldiers were killed over a year period. So, August of 1971 through December 1971, 30 British soldiers are killed, whereas previously, within an entire year span, only 10 were.
Yeah.
Like, it just immediately skyrocketed violence.
Was there any, like, recorded reason of why the British soldiers killed those two civvies?
No. It's just kind of, I think it's more so there was kind of invasions happening in some of these, and it's honestly internment without trial. So they're like, you're potentially associated with the IRA. We got word of that. So now we're going to break in or we're going to find you or whatever it is. Right.
And it was on my Mars bar wrapper that you're part of the IRA.
Right. And so now you have to come with me sort of thing. And I think that just kind of, and I think the 14-year-old girl was more, it seems more mistake driven in a way, but kind of is wrapped than anything else. So an additional 6 soldiers are killed in Derry at the very end of 1971. So by this point, the IRA had established a no-go areas for the British Army, building 29 barricades, had fired 1,322 rounds, set off 211 explosions, and 180 nail bombs.
Holy shit.
Which they loved nail bombs. The IRA loved nail bombs for some reason.
It's good shrapnel.
I get... okay.
There's no good shrapnel.
I mean, right, but it is, yeah. More bang for your buck, you know what I mean?
Right.
Sorry, that was in poor taste. So 16 of the 29 barricades that surrounded Free Derry were completely impassable.
Okay.
Like, even British Army vehicles could not get past them. I was like, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
4 million pounds of damage had been done, or had been caused to local buildings in Derry over this time. Yeah. So now we're at January 1971, which is about a year before Bloody Sunday.
Okay.
Right? So Brian Faulkner, Northern Irish Prime Minister, bans all parades and marches in the region through the end of the year.
Okay.
So 4 days later, in defiance of the ban, the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association holds an anti-internment march in McGilligan near Derry. So NICRA and protesters marched to an internment camp, but were stopped by the parachute regiment of the British Army. So protesters threw stones and tried to go around the barbed wire stops, but paratroopers held them back by firing rubber bullets at close range and coordinating baton charges.
Oh,
which I feel like I knew what baton charges were, but it's like, it feels so formal to, like, you know what I mean? Because, like, it is a strategy of defense or of attack. Yeah, but I'm just like, it just feels so sterile.
It's a very like medieval tactic.
Yeah.
Because you most likely have a line of your militant, your police officers, or your militia. They all have their batons, swords, couple hundred years ago before this event. Maybe some of them have riot shields, and they just have that line, and then they all go at once. They charge, and they have their batons ready. And it's just it's supposed to be like this wave of overwhelming force to control. It's not great, to control
a crowd,
the crowd,
right?
Yeah,
it's just I get it, and I get why it makes sense.
Yeah,
it just feels for something so violent, it just feels so
sterile, and planned, and
formalized.
Practiced.
Yeah,
it's been around probably since, I don't know, since the invention of swords and shields.
yeah. I mean, yeah. So, so paratroopers badly beat many protesters, and some even had to be held back by their fellow officers. So paratrooper TV outlets and the press witnessed and reported widely the allegations of brutality by paratroopers, with some British Army soldiers expressing they also felt paratroopers inflicted undue violence.
Of course.
So this group of the British Army is just kind of already viewed as super aggressive, like going over the top, unnecessary. Right.
Of course.
So I'm so sorry. I'm going to go back really quick. When I said January 18th, 1971, I actually meant January 18th, 1972. My bad.
Gotcha.
Because a few weeks later, NICRA decides to hold another march on January 30th, 1972 in Derry.
Okay.
So I apologize. I miswrote that. So authorities decided to allow for the march to proceed in the Bogside, but wanted it stopped from reaching Guildhall Square, where originally planned, to prevent a potentially rioting. And a Guildhall is like kind of where people govern, like local government, like meetings are held.
Yeah, town hall gathering place.
Yeah. So they're like, we don't want something in the center, and then things kind of spiral out of control, whatever it might be, right? So Major General Robert Ford ordered the 1st Battalion, Parachute Regiment 1 Para, to Derry to arrest rioters. It was also known as codename Operation Forecast.
But they weren't rioting, were they?
So the initial idea was, if this does get out of hand and this does become a riot of sorts at the rally, then we have military in place to be able to immediately arrest rioters, right? And you'll see, we're about to get into the actual day of the event, and you'll see kind of that background of them being like, all right, like only go and do this, and then some other things kind of take place, and it fucking goes out of control. So March organizer and MP Ivan Cooper promised before the day that no armed IRA members would come near the march. So he's like, I can't tell you if there's going to be IRA members or not because that's a wash
It's
bag.
their own business, right?
But at the same time, there's not going to be no one armed.
Right.
Like I can promise you that. Right.
That no one will be armed there.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of everything leading up to the day of the event, right?
Okay.
Because now we have organized our second march. We know it's going to be January 30th, 1972. We're ready to go. We're trying to protest this internment without trial, and also the fact that, like you've said, no parades or marches, like all these things, right? So, and again, you know, there's so much before that kind of lead up to this. Like, this is kind of the beginnings of the Troubles. But of course, like, before the Troubles even began, you have all this conflict, right? And like we said, you can boil that down to kind of like loyalists versus nationalists, but there's so much more nuance.
Well, I mean, it's been a centuries-long conflict between the people of the island of Ireland and the crown.
Right.
You know, like going back to medieval times, King Arthur, all that shit.
Yeah. Well, and how often do we see this story repeated over and over and over again in history around the world? You know what I mean? So
I'd like to once again say that history is a cyclical bitch.
Hey, you be nice to history. All right.
That's on our underwear brand.
Yeah.
We're going to put out. It's going to be on the ass cheeks.
Like juicy. Yeah, okay. Perfect. History's a cyclical bitch.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Or we start doing frisbees.
That would be
probably better.
Yeah. Because it's cyclical.
More round.
Yeah. You get it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So now we're at event day.
Yeah.
So this is everything that has occurred on the day,
big
January
day.
30th, the big day. So paratroopers arrive in Derry the morning of January 30th. Brigadier Pat McLuhan was the operational commander and gave orders from Edbrington Barracks. So he's overseeing this entire kind of operation, the entire operation. Yeah. Perfect. So, but he's not in it.
Okay.
He's giving orders from barracks, which are outside of
Okay.
where the march is happening,
Yeah.
right? Lieutenant Colonel Derek Wilford, commander of 1 Para, received these orders and related them to Major Ted Loden. So Major Loden commanded the company who would launch and enact Operation Forecast.
Okay.
So you have like boots on the ground company. You have Major Ted Loden kind of directing the boots on the ground. You have Lieutenant Colonel Derek Wilford relaying information from the barracks to Major and kind of overseeing the entire thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you have the Brigadier actually saying, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. The parade route was to start from Bishop's Field and end at Guildhall Square in the city center where the rally would take place. So the march set off at about 2:45 p.m. with about 10 to 15,000 marchers, many joining along the route as it continued, right? Later, the British Inquiry, which we'll talk about, only states 3,000 to 5,000 marchers, which is kind of bullshit. I think they were like downplaying the size of it, but it was huge.
Right.
So the march set off without a hitch. However, as it made its way down William Street and began to near the city center, the path suddenly was blocked by British Army barriers. Because remember, they don't want them going to Guildhall Square, right? But they didn't really say that beforehand.
Oh, okay.
Like they expressed it, I'm sure, but not in a way of like, no, your route can't do that. Because I think also stating that would just force them to try to push through more. Whereas if I'm just blocking you in the moment, like, so what happens is organizers calmly reroute down Rossville Street and decided to hold the rally at Free Dairy Corner instead. Oh. Because in the moment, they're like, well, we're not going to all of a sudden fight the British Army, right? Yeah. So we're just going to switch down Rossville and then have it over here instead.
Well, it's annoying that like they didn't provide a solution. They're like, we're going to stop you from doing here. We don't want you here, but like maybe host it over here instead. Like, why won't we... They're just looking to antagonize these people just trying to have their peaceful march.
They're just right, because that's the other thing is that like if you don't antagonize them, let them have the rally and then it's done. You know what I mean? But like don't be a little bitch about it. But like that's the British Army, I guess. And so little bitches. And so they broke off, they went to Free Dairy Corner to hold the rally instead. Okay. Right. So organizers are like, you know what? We're going to be the bigger people. We're going to take the higher road. We're going to go over here. Fine. Although a large majority of participants went along with the quick change in plans, some broke off and began throwing stones at the soldiers at the barricades. Because again, I mean, that's the thing, right? So, like, that's kind of... So, they began throwing stones, right?
Right.
Then, in retaliation, the soldiers fired rubber bullets, tear gas, and water cannons. Which seems like a huge... Like, okay, they're throwing rocks and, like, you're, like, shooting water cannons.
Yeah.
However, the clash was seen as common, with reporters saying that rioting between soldiers and youth was no more violent than usual. So, like, while we say, like, oh, you know, these, like, young kids were throwing stones at the soldiers and then they dropped tear gas and rubber bullets, they're like, That's kind of normal. Like, it's nothing out of hand yet.
Yeah, it's just kind of classic crowd control.
Right.
The first steps of... Or I guess step 2.
Right.
First step was having
barricades.
the barricade.
Yeah. So it just kind of wild to read that, where they were like, you might be reading this and say that's insane.
Right.
But it was just kind of common. Yeah, the usual violence. So while the clash is happening, some of the crowd noticed paratroopers in a rundown building on William Street and thus begin throwing stones at the windows. Okay. So they were like, oh, like, why are people in the buildings?
Why are they stationed
But, like,
there?
we see them, like, screw you guys. Like, let's throw rocks. You know what I mean? So they also love their stones. Like, stones and nail bombs were like the thing for the IRA. And so...
Well, you could find a rock anywhere.
Right. Well, with all the rubble. And so at about 3:55 p.m., the paratroopers in the building began to open fire on the crowd below. So Damien Donaghy...
Live ammunition?
Uh-huh.
Oh.
So Damien Donaghy and John Johnston... which great name. John Johnson were the first to be shot and wounded. The soldiers will later claim Damien was holding a black cylindrical object. Surprised he wasn't.
Right.
They were just like, oh, he has holding something that looks like a bomb or a gun, or you know what I mean? So shoot him. So those were the first 2 shots to go out and the first 2 wounded. 4:07 p.m. So that was at 3:55 p.m.
Yeah.
4:07 p.m. The paratroopers were ordered to cross the barriers and arrest rioters. So soldiers on foot and in armored vehicles chased people down Rossville Street and pushed them into the Bogside. 2 civilians were actually knocked down by the vehicles.
Oh.
So Brigadier McClellan orders that only one company of paratroopers is to cross the barrier on foot, and they should not chase people down Rossville Street. So they're like, okay, go get rioters, because now they're throwing stones, things are happening. Cross the barrier, go get rioters, grab them, come back. Like, don't chase anyone, don't do anything like that. But, like, if you happen to get someone, that's what we're doing, right? Lieutenant Colonel Wilford, however, adamantly disobeyed this order and enacted that there was no separation between rioters and peaceful protesters and marchers.
Oh.
So he's like, fuck it.
Love
just
that.
Get anyone you want.
Perfect.
We love it. Lieutenant Colonel Wilford is just a jackass through and through.
Sounds like
very like Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men. Like, that's the vibe that I get. He feels like this was necessary and we had to do it, and like we'll do anything because of. And he's like, I don't give a fuck.
Okay.
Yeah, just to give you a little context, a little psychological background. So excessive force was used by the paratroopers, with witnesses reporting beatings, clubbing with rifle butts, firing rubber bullets at close range, making threats to kill, and general abuse. So, quote, paratroopers use excessive force when arresting people, as well as seriously assaulting them for no good reason while in their custody. So, like, we arrested you and you're handcuffed, but we're still going to beat the shit out of you.
Well, you can't defend yourself.
Right. Love to see it. So at a low wall, about 80 yards across from a rubble barricade that stretched across Rossville Street, a group of paratroopers took up position. So it's barricade, like Irish barricade, right? And then there's like a low wall across from it, about 80 yards between. And the paratroopers are like by that wall. Like reading it, it didn't fully click in my brain, so that's why I wanted to clarify.
Is there like a no man's land between the wall and the barricade?
Correct.
Okay.
There's 80 yards between the two, but they're facing each other. Got it?
Got it.
Cool. So the barricade crosses Rossville, which is where everyone was running down, right? So everyone's running towards the barricade to try to get away.
Oh, do we have paratroopers on both sides?
You don't have paratroopers behind the barricade. You have people, civilians, running to the barricade, but there's a wall, like a low wall, 80 yards in front of the barricade. So if I'm running down the street, I'm going to pass this wall to run to the barricade.
Okay.
And paratroopers stop at that wall.
Okay.
Okay. So civilians were at the barricade with some throwing stones at the soldiers, but were not close enough to hit them because, again, it's 80 yards. Right. However, the soldiers fired on the barricades and thus people, killing 6 and wounding 1.
Jeez.
So a large group then fled and were chased in the parking lot of the Rossville Flats, which was an open courtyard surrounded on 3 sides by high-rises. So like 3 towers and then, the courtyard or the parking lot in the middle. Of course, when I'm looking this up, everyone says car park. And I was like, I'm not writing car park. I'm writing parking lot. And so as they're running, soldiers opened fire on the group, fleeing, killing 1 civilian and wounding 6 others. So Jackie Duddy was running alongside a priest, Father Edward Daly. I'm going to try that again.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jackie Duddy was running alongside a priest, Father Edward Daly, when Jackie was shot in the back. Father Daly took part in several, just to give you a background on Father Daly as well, because he is kind of a prominent figure inadvertently so Father Daly took part in several civil rights marches during the Troubles, but famously was photographed during Bloody Sunday when he was waving a blood-stained white handkerchief as he stands in front of a group, as he's escorting a group of civilians carrying the mortally wounded Jackie Duddy. So they're like a group of civilians pick up Jackie after he's been shot, and the priest has a white handkerchief, but it's covered in blood.
Right.
And he's kind of like guarding them and waving this white handkerchief to show peace as this group is carrying Jackie's body.
Jeez.
So that image is kind of the image of like Bloody Sunday and the Troubles. It's like famously known. And so while that's happening, another group of people ran into the parking lot of the Glenfada Park Apartments, which was also surrounded by high-rises. Soldiers shot across the courtyard, killing 2 civilians and wounding 4 others. Paratroopers ran after the group of civilians through the parking lot and split. So one group of paratroopers ran out the southeast corner, killing 2 civilians. The other group of paratroopers ran out the southwest corner, killing 2 civilians. The other group of paratroopers ran out the southeast corner, killing 2 civilians and wounding 2 others.
Okay.
So now it's not even a matter of like, it's like chase and shoot. Right? Because it's not even a matter of like we're defending ourselves or we're like gonna chase to try to arrest you. Like we're now shooting across the courtyard. We're not, you know what I mean?
It's not a matter of control. It's a matter of doing harm.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. We've changed tactic now.
Yeah.
And you're on the offense. And so what's crazy is only about 10 minutes had elapsed from the time the soldiers crossed the barriers to when the last civilian was shot. Wow. So you kind of think about like, okay, so Lieutenant Colonel Wilford, who's kind of overseeing everything on the ground, right, is like disobeying whatever, and so they go 10 minutes is elapsing. There's not enough time for that information to get back to the brigadier in the barracks and then for them to deploy some sort of like tactic to calm everything, right?
Right.
It's so quick. Like within 10 minutes, all of that happens.
Right. And like, how are you going to then figure out your new method of controlling this new chaos happening? Like
exactly.
How are you going to come up with a plan within those 10 minutes?
Because if I'm on the brigadier and I'm on the ground and I'm seeing this happen, I can immediately stop something in the moment, right? Because like then everyone's reporting to me, whatever it happens. But if I'm in the barracks, like miles away, and then this news is finally like 3 to 4 minutes in, getting back to me, now I'm taking another 1 to 2 minutes to make a plan or try to understand what you're saying. Like there's so much. 10 minutes, done.
Well, and you're supposed to be able to rely on your chain of command to follow your original order. Because the barracks, the original order was keep peace.
Right.
And then the asshole was like, no. And so that's where you're fucked.
And like too high of stature, right? Because if it was Major Ted Loden who was like, oh, let's fuck some people up.
Right.
Then that's different because then Lieutenant Colonel could have been like, what are you doing? Pull him out, whatever it is. Right.
You are able to control that a little bit better.
Right. But because he was the highest ranking officer on the ground and he's the one disobeying, what are they going to do?
Right.
Well, I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, so anyway. So only about 10 minutes. Those that were shot were given first aid by civilian volunteers, either at the scene or after they had been carried into nearby homes. Some had been driven to the hospital either in civilian cars or by ambulances, with the first ambulance arriving at 4:28.
Yeah.
Remember, 3:55 was the first shot. So about a half hour later we get the first ambulance arriving at the hospital.
Right.
3 boys killed at the barricade were driven to the hospitals by paratroopers, but witnesses describe seeing the paratroopers lift the bodies by their hands and feet and dump them into the army vehicles as if they were a piece of meat. So even after the fact, they're like, fuck it.
Yeah.
So that's the event itself. And talk about kind of the casualties and the people who died during the scene. So in total, 26 people, again, were shot by paratroopers, 13 being killed on the spot, and the 14th dying of his injuries 4 months later. So all soldiers responsible for the killings claimed that they had only shot and hit perceived civilians with guns and bomb throwers. So they were like, we only killed people who we thought were going to attack us, which, bullshit, right? They also stated that they hit all of their exact targets and no civilian was struck by mistake. So they're like, everyone we killed, intentional.
Everyone you killed was intentional?
That's what they're saying.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So in August of 1973, an inquest into the deaths was held by the city's coroner at the time, retired British Army Major Hubert O'Neill, and in a statement at completion declared, quote, "This Sunday became known as Bloody Sunday, and bloody it was. It was quite unnecessary. It strikes me that the army ran amok that day and shot without thinking what they were doing. They were shooting innocent people. These people may have had been taking part in a march that was banned, but that does not justify the troops coming in and firing live rounds indiscriminately. I would say without hesitation that it was sheer, unadulterated murder. It was murder."
Yeah, 100%.
And that's a retired British Army major. So he's not even like, I'm not even defending my people. You know what I mean?
No,
he's
he
like,
knows
that was
they fucked up.
Yeah. So I want to talk, we're going to get into a list of the casualties and kind of how they died. And it's more so when I was thinking about it, I was like, it's not necessary to kind of say how they were shot. But then I thought about it and I was like, it kind of is, because a lot of these folks were either shot while giving aid or while fleeing. And I just want to kind of understand the full context of there wasn't a lot of indiscrimination between whether they were armed or not, or facing or throwing stuff. You know what I mean? Right. I just kind of want to say that as I get into it, it's not to kind of sensationalize it. It's more so to kind of provide context as to how insane the soldier account is to what was happening on the ground.
Yeah.
So
because these were all intentional.
Correct. So John Jackie Duddy was 17, killed in the Rossville Flats with a deliberate aim by the soldier as a bullet struck him in the shoulder and entered his chest. First fatality of Bloody Sunday. He was unarmed. Michael Kelly, 17, shot in the stomach at the barricade on Rossville Street, unarmed. Hugh Gilmer, 17, shot as he ran away from soldiers at the barricade with the bullet going through his left elbow and entered his chest, unarmed. William Nash, 19, shot in the chest at the barricade. Three others were shot as they rushed to his aid, including his father, Alexander Nash. John Young, 17, shot in the face at the barricade while crouching, attempting to reach and aid William Nash, unarmed. Michael McDade, 20, shot in the face at the barricade while crouching, attempting to reach and aid William Nash, unarmed. Kevin McElhaney, 17, shot from behind near the barricade while attempting to crawl to safety, unarmed. James Jim Rye, 22, shot in the back while fleeing in the Glenfada Park courtyard, mortally wounding him before being shot again as he called out that he could not move his legs, unarmed. William McKinney, 26, shot in the back while fleeing in the Glenfada Park courtyard, unarmed. Jerry McKinney, 35, shot in the chest from a few yards away at Abbey Park while fleeing through an alleyway near Glenfada Park. Upon seeing the soldier, McKinney raised his hands and kept shouting, "Don't shoot, don't shoot," before being shot. The bullet passed through his chest and struck Jared Donaghy, standing behind him, unarmed. Jerry Donaghy, 17, shot in the stomach at Abbey Park by the same bullet that killed Jerry McKinney. So bystanders brought Donaghy to a nearby home for aid, and they searched him for identification while a doctor was examining him. Eventually, 2 of the bystanders attempted to drive Donaghy to the hospital, but were stopped at a British Army checkpoint. The soldiers at the checkpoint ordered the bystanders to leave the car, and the soldiers drove it to the regimental aid post where the Army medical officer pronounced Donaghy dead. Now, before I keep going, what I will say is that it does seem like the soldiers were like, we don't have a vehicle potentially. Like, get out, we'll drive him.
We'll be able to get through the checkpoints faster.
And get him faster and those things, right? So and the Army medical officer was like ready to look. So there does seem to be some sort of empathy and like actual aid from these specific soldiers at this point, right? However, shortly after the pronouncement, soldiers, quote, found 4 nail bombs in Donaghy's pockets, but the civilians that aided him, the soldiers that drove him, and the Army medical officer all said they found no bombs previously.
Of course.
Because they searched him, right? The bystanders were like, identification, we need to know who you are.
Who is this guy?
The soldiers also were like patting him down. The Army, you know what I mean? All of it. And then all of a sudden, after the pronunciation of death, they were like, oh, look, we found 4 nail bombs. And it's not like they're fucking Tamagotchis. You know what I mean? Like, these things are like a good size.
Right,
and so you would have found that, you know? But of course, Jerry Donaghy unarmed. Patrick Doherty, 31, shot from behind while attempting to crawl to safety at Rossville Flats. Photographs actually were taken by a French journalist immediately before and after Doherty's death, which aided in the fact to show that he was unarmed. Bernard Barney McGuigan, 41, shot in the back of the head at the Rossville Flats when walking out from cover to aid Patrick Doherty while waving a white handkerchief, unarmed. And John Johnson, 59, shot in the leg and left shoulder on William Street 15 minutes before the rest of the shooting actually started. So what happened was he wasn't a participant in the march. He was passing through the area to visit a friend that was in the Glavenfada park apartments, and he died. He was the one that died of his injuries about 4 months later. Only fatality not to occur immediately or quickly after being shot.
Jeez.
So those are the 14 that were killed during Bloody Sunday. And again, and I'm sure after we heard all that, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But I think it's also to show in no instance were 75% of them could they have been perceived as a threat to soldiers.
Especially the ones, crawling away,
saying I can't move my legs, like saying don't shoot, waving a white handkerchief, trying to aid. Like, there's so many instances where like they have nothing in their hands or they're not doing anything that's
threatening.
Right? And again, like, they're throwing stones, if anything. You know what I mean? All of these people, majority of these people were fleeing. There were those 3 at the barricade that were throwing stones 80 yards away from you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
and I'm sure, and I don't know if you can confirm, but like I'm sure the militia were wearing helmets.
Well, exactly. I mean, you're military. You're in full regalia, right? So, obviously, first of all, it was completely unmatched, and second of all, it just was excessive to be excessive.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the day of the events. That's the casualties. So before we get into anything else, I think let's pause and we'll pick up part 2 next week because then we're going to start to get into, some more meat of some things. So,
yeah, the part 2 will be more of the aftermath of all of this.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. And so kind of what we saw as resolution and some things that are actually only a few weeks old as far as news for something
it's still
happened.
going. It's still going.
In 1972.
Right.
So
love it.
We love to see it. But I think you will see a lot of justice in a way being served. So we'll take the small win for now.
Okay. So we're gonna sit angrily for a week.
Correct.
And then next week,
everyone stew for a week. Can't wait for your anger. Right, Devin, you're really hot.
Sit it tight for a week, and we'll let you find out the rest of the story next time. What do you know, Nick and Devin?
Way to leave that out.
Fuck me. Right.
But thank you, everyone, for sticking around. Come back next week for some more information here. I know that was heavy, so sit with it. We'll come back. I'll give you the rest of the story, but follow us on WDYK podcast and all the things. Thanks for subscribing, and see you next week.
See you next week, everybody.
All right, bye.
Bye.